America together. This is the Jeff Santos Show.
Well, some big news coming out of Washington, D.C. Mr. Obama just gave a pardon to Chelsea Manning. 35-year sentence ends in May. Big news. All right, way to go, President Obama, doing the right thing. All right, our time for us to go to the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest. Talk to a great journalist, independent journalist, somebody who's not a third-way member, somebody who isn't part of the D.C. Beltway blowhards, somebody who understands digging, somebody who's been there when the protest and with the tear gas goes out. Great regular Capitol Hill Times, Daily Kos, and of course right here every Tuesday on the Jeff Santos Show. It's time to talk to MTC. Mark Taylor-Canfield joins us from Seattle, WA. Happy Tuesday, Mark.
Hey, happy Tuesday, Jeff. And thanks, Ron, for playing my song again. I wanted to let folks know we're talking about these theme songs that presidential candidates have chosen. Well, I've been in the studio over the last 3 days recording a song about Donald Trump. So there you go. I'll let you guys get a copy of it when we're done. But it's been a lot of fun. I think artists really need to speak out at this time. And I think we need more political music in the music industry in the United States. We need to go back where, some of the number one songs are political songs. And so I'm going to try to do what I can to help push that ahead. But yeah, it's a great day in Seattle. It's rainy and dark, and I can't even tell what time of day it is because it's so overcast. There you go. That's for all the people who want to move here.
So it's the Chamber of Commerce moment. No, I'm only kidding. But it's actually how they want to be portrayed, right? Get that coffee house going and buy a bunch of coffee and stay inside. We all know that it's sunny in Seattle too. I want to talk to you about this article that we brought up in my opening, and this to me is I think where a lot of the news, and we'll get to what the protests that are happening in Seattle, and of course across this country in preparation of Donald Trump becoming the 45th president of the United States. But I'm concerned where the Democratic Party is going. And this article today by Ms. Carney of Politico, I hope is a warning shot to a lot of progressives, whether they are living in Seattle or Boston or Berkeley or wherever in liberal America. And obviously in the offices of the likes of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. This to me is a real wake-up call. We cannot just take anybody who could potentially lead the Democratic Party right into the hands of the third way, whether we're talking about Mr. Perez or Mr. Buckley or any of the other candidates that are running against Keith Ellison. This, to me, is a real true test. Now, they are going to try to do everything to discredit Mr. Ellison. We heard our caller, John, talk about a producer for the Bill Press show saying that he's too liberal, Mr. Ellison is. And that, to me, is now going to be the whisper. It's going to be the whisper that he's too liberal, that we got to get somebody, who's more milquetoast. And they're not going to say that, of course, but that's basically what it's going to do. A yes man or yes woman. And I believe that we are at a point right now where that cannot be the case. Because as you well know, more than anybody, Mark, the young people are not going to go and get excited and go out and vote for more middle-of-the-road, Democratic, liberal wannabes who really are Republican light. And in my view, this is a way to basically give the middle finger to Bernie and Elizabeth. And that, to me, is a way to destroy the Democratic Party once and for all. It's already a minority party throughout this country. There are Pacific Coast and the Northeast and a couple of places in the middle part of the country, Chicago, Denver, New Mexico, maybe Minnesota. But that's it. Those are the states. All the others went for Mr. Trump. And we need to really reconsider this. I want to get your thoughts because you talk to these folks. I mean, it may not get out there just yet. But if this stuff continues, they got $20 million to launch the New Blue campaign. It sounds like, the new Democratic or the new Labor Party that Tony Blair, bamboozled his way into office, which led us into an Iraq war that he sanctioned as the puppy for Mr. Bush. I just think this is really alarming. Your thoughts, my friend?
Out of touch. That's the way I put it. There, once again, these are a group of people, Washington insiders, who don't know what's going on in the rest of the country. They got blindsided by the Trump campaign and this election, and if they're not careful, it could happen again, because Bernie Sanders was the guy who could have won some of those states. Hillary Clinton didn't even come close in some of those. So, and we have this issue here in Seattle or in Washington State, where our senators Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray just recently in the last few days voted against this Democrat-led amendment to import drugs from Canada. So that did not go well. That did not go down well with a lot of the progressives in Washington State. And I'm hearing more and more calls, replace Cantwell and Murray, replace Cantwell and Murray. So that's the direction that the grassroots of the party is headed, is more progressive candidates, more folks like Pramila Jayapal, who is our new Congress member here from Washington State. We in Seattle especially are not interested in the same old Democrat corporate wing of the party. And if the Democrats don't understand that, they're going to lose some of more of their traditional progressive constituency, at least here in Washington State. And that's what I've been hearing, Jeff, is people are throwing up their hands saying, WTF, are we going to move ahead or not? And then I've written recently at Democracy Watch News, which, by the way, is a international news group, and you can check it out on Twitter and Facebook, our feeds from all over the world. But I've also written at Capitol Hill Times about this idea. Are our institutions in the United States even up to the task? Are they even adequate to address some of these issues like climate change, like rigged elections? Do we really have the institutions that can address these problems? Well, Bernie Sanders came closest to any candidate for president to addressing some of this economic inequality and the corruption in our political system. And I'm just saying, are the Democrats even up to the task? That's still a big question mark to me, Jeff.
Well, that's the question. And again, I have no problem, protesting Donald Trump. And there'll be a lot of people on Saturday in the mall, and there'll be people throughout the country. I know in Seattle and in Boston there'll be events. But we need to really start focusing on the issues. Enough of attacking Donald Trump. That didn't do any good. You attacked him. You made him out to be the worst thing, since the devil. And it didn't do any good. And the fact is that we need to start focusing on the issues. And for that matter, on the Republican Party. The Republican Party is the one that has been trying to get rid of Social Security and Medicare for years, even before Donald Trump was a thought to be a political candidate. The Republican Party has been, they called Medicare a communist plot. Ronald Reagan did in 1960 in a commercial. You can go on and on and on. And that's where the Democrats should focus their attention. Now, these folks at the third way, maybe they're thinking that they're going to bring over Republicans, and that's how they're going to run the party. Just as I think Hillary Clinton had an idea that she was going to sort of merge the sort of more, you can go on and on down the line, never mind NAFTA and everything else that comes out of the bad trade deals. This is what you're going to end up. And I think the majority of people, not only in this country, but the people in the middle part of the country, which has been devastated by trade deals, said a big fat NO to that kind of democratic politics.
Well, the scenario has certainly changed from this idea that, Politico was writing about that. Once Hillary Clinton gets elected, she's going to try to recruit Republicans into her administration, hoping that the Republican Party will just die on the vine due to its own extremism. Well, now the scenario has shifted, and people are wondering whether the Democratic Party is going to die on the vine. not so much because of extremism, but because of its inability or unwillingness to embrace the progressive wing of its own party. And that's where the Democrats came from. I mean, this is the party of FDR. This is the party of John Kennedy. This is the party of liberals and progressives, not the party of the corporate crowd. And if they don't get that through their heads, then yes, a lot of the MLK March in Seattle is a long tradition that is organized by the MLK Celebration Committee. And there is a connection here in Seattle to Martin Luther King Jr. He was here to support the custodian strike, the janitor strike, just before his assassination. So he was working with some of our local African-American, Asian, Native American leaders, Hispanic leaders in Seattle. And some of the people on the MLK Celebration Committee actually worked directly with him. So it's not unusual for there to be 15,000 people marching on MLK Day, and this year was no exception. And there was definitely a new sense of organization going on. I think what the conversation I've heard over and over again is that people have been asleep for a long time. A lot of folks in the Democratic Party have been asleep for a long time. I even spoke to a police officer, Jeff, who was a African-American police captain for the Seattle Police Department, who told me it's time for people to stand up. You know what I mean? So even some folks in our own local law enforcement are seeing this. And, you know, Seattle needs to lead the way. There was a big event at Seattle City Hall on Saturday, led mostly by, or at least largely by, Shama Sawant, our Socialist City Council member. And that whole day of events was how to organize for the Inauguration Day protests. And they were actually using our own city hall. So that gives you an indication of where our city government is on this issue. I mean, I don't think Mayor Murray or anybody on the city council is excited about this Trump administration. And they also want to speak out publicly on some of these issues you were talking about. And I do agree with you that we need to take on these things issue by issue, because this cult of personality thing, whether it's, you know, I love the guy or, you know, he's crazy, does distract people a lot from the real issues that we need to deal with. And given the way our Congress has been running over the last few terms, not getting much done, I think people really want effective leadership, and they want people to tell the truth. They're really tired of this fake politics that's been going on. So in Seattle, I mean, I interviewed Jesse Weinberry, who was a 5-term state legislator in our state. He talked about, well, now that the Seahawks, dropped out of the playoff run for the Super Bowl, we need to have a 12th man or 12th woman or 12th person concept regarding activism. And he spoke from the podium saying, we need you to commit yourself to 12 months of organizing yourself and organizing your neighborhood and getting involved with politics. One of the things that he was encouraging people to do was, 1, register to vote, and 2, run for office. Because as I've been saying for a long time now, we need working class folks representing us. I'm tired of the billionaires and millionaires being the candidates. And so I also interviewed Aaron Jones, who is a former assistant superintendent of public instruction in Washington State, and we have so many problems with funding our K through 12 public education program here. She had a lot of very strident things to say, too, about what it's like to be a black woman in the society and what it's like, you know, facing a Trump administration. And, you know, and for folks who are upset at these appointments, I mean, what, you have a problem with the head of ExxonMobil being our Secretary of State? What? Why should you be worried about that, right? In the song I was writing about how, Trump is basically kissing the ass of the corporations, and so we can look forward to the monopolization of our nation, not only in the markets, but in our own government at this point. And that is not a recipe for a healthy society or a healthy social welfare system. So, hey, if folks decide that they want to vote for a socialist candidate or they want to join other alternative independent parties, I mean, at this point, the Democrats aren't going to be able to stop them. They're not setting the standard. They're not sending the signals that would attract those people back to the Democratic Party at this point. And this new idea of the third way, I mean, oh man, it just looks like a disaster to me. That's my editorial comment.
Well, it's very interesting because, the way I see this, and Pramila Jayapal, who you know very well, and we've had on the show, the new Congresswoman from Seattle, replacing Mr. McDermott, tweets out today that Ms. DeVos, the new pick for Secretary of Education, has worked for 2 decades to weaken public schools in Michigan. And, in my opinion, that is where the Democratic Party, the progressive movement, has to be focused upon. Go after DeVos and make it very clear that she's going to destroy public education as we know it. Go after, the fact that Price wants to destroy Medicare and Medicaid and revamp the Affordable Care Act, and millions of Americans will lose their health care insurance. And that, to me, is what the Democratic Party should be doing. Enough of this nonsense of protesting the inauguration. I'm sick and tired of it's going to be 48 or 52, whatever. It'll be done on Saturday. Everything will be done. The protest will be over. Let's move forward and get at the real issues. Enough of this sort of, everything is good for the cameras. And I just think that, to me, she gets it, and I know that there are a lot of other people that get it, but we're getting lost here in this idea that Trump is the evil person. Well, the fact is, if they got rid of him, they have a worse person in Pence. And in the whole Republican Party, which is much closer to Pence than they are to Trump, you would push all these things that I just talked about. This is the frustrating part of it, Mark, and you can hear it in my voice, because, I just think that, there is some things here that have to be realized in what is progressive and what is just for show.
Well, I think a lot of folks, what they're thinking is that if we just keep putting pressure on the Trump administration and having demonstrations and boycotts and whatever it takes, that their idea is to make the guy so unpopular, I think, that other candidates or other potential future candidates won't support him, and that maybe even some of the members of Congress will turn against him if they think that it's going to affect their next election bid. So I think that's part of the strategy that some of those people are thinking. They're just thinking, we make the guy as unpopular as possible, we highlight all of his negative aspects, and hoping that it will scare other folks away from him. But if the way the Republicans are dealing with him at this moment is any indication, I don't know if that's an effective strategy, because the Republicans, just like any other political party, are going to circle the wagons, and they are going to protect their guy. I mean, that's just the way it is. And this idea of impeachment, well, unless it's a criminal offense, and that is a possibility considering the way the guy's ethics are, but unless it's some kind of a serious criminal offense, there aren't enough Democrats in the Senate to vote for impeachment. So I don't know where that is going to go. I mean, I don't know what you do. You have a constitutional crisis if your own Congress doesn't want to impeach someone who has violated the tenets of their office. I don't know what you do at that point. Do you bring in the Justice Department with a guy like Sessions, who's Trump's buddy? I don't know. But in terms of the issues, yeah, that might help actually progressives and Democrats kind of clarify their position. I think they've been kind of mealy-mouthed on a lot of these issues for years now, and people have seen them move towards the right and support more and more corporate interests. So all I can say, Jeff, is a dividing line has been drawn. It was drawn by Donald Trump, and people are going to have to decide which side of the line to step on, and those folks who do not support the administration better get involved in our own political system and the workings of our own government. That's that conversation I had with the police captain, is that, yes, people need to get involved in their own government. Otherwise, we're all going to be, they're going to run roughshod over all of us. Women, men, minorities, you name it. People have to take politics seriously, and they have to make their party and their elected officials, they have to hold them accountable and demand authentic representation, because otherwise, it's just another Wall Street run administration. And regardless of what Trump has said and rhetorically about his support of working people or whatever, I mean, outside of things like the TPP and the trade agreements, he represents the corporations. And if people don't understand that. A lot of the supporters are going to be sorely disappointed by some of his decisions or what's going on in this administration. So wake up, people. It's time to take things seriously. Forget the fake politics and the fake media coverage. Get out there in your own neighborhood and organize and take personal responsibility for what happens in the political system from now on. Because if you sit back and you rely on the Democrats to represent you, well, we see what you get.
And by the way, just another breaking news, and Mr. Obama's in a mode to forgive people today. He also pardoned James Cartwright, the retired Marine Corps general, who, as vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, pleaded guilty to leaking to reporters about the Iran nuclear program. So this is two days, and on issues that involve the press. I know that you work closely with Reporters Without Borders and others who have been involved both in the Manning and the Cartwright case. Your thoughts about this before
the Revolution Radio Network.
772-925-8206, the phone number to join us. We're going to be going to Milwaukee, WI, in a couple of minutes. Talk to our good friend Robert Kraig. Just once again, an update if you didn't miss it. Both Chelsea Manning, formerly Bradley Manning, and of course also Mr. Cartwright, both whistleblowers to the media, have been pardoned today by President Obama in what is a surprising but very positive to this talk show host move by the president. The more we can have in the open, the better America will be, in my view. You can email me, Jeff at revolutionboston.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter at Jeff Santos Show. It is now time for us to go to the Badger State, a state that the Democrats have to win in 2018 for governor and 2020 for president if they want to be a majority party, and someone who will help them do that if given the reins, if given the keys to the car, is our next guest. He is a regular here every Tuesday on the Jeff Santos Show for the entire hour. And he is, of course, the executive director of Wisconsin Citizen Action. He is Robert Kraig. And we say good afternoon, Robert, and happy Tuesday, sir.
You too, Jeff. 2 days away from the end of the world as we know it.
Yes. Appropriate song for our window, isn't it? But we'll be fine. The world will still be around on Friday evening. Well, let me tell you, I am eager to talk to you and eager to talk to our callers, and we'll get to John and Rudy in a few minutes, about what we've learned over the last few hours on the issue both of the good news of Bradley Manning and General Cartwright, who's been called the favorite general of Mr. Obama. And also what really angers me is this article in Politico today by Ms. Carney about this third way initiative, which in the end looks to push aside Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and go once again down the mushy middle, the corporate middle of the Democratic Party, the corporate wing of the party, and push that upon us. $20 million being pushed by the third way group. But let's start on the good news. Your view here. I mean, a lot of people, on the foreign policy world, we're basically ready to put Bradley/Chelsea Manning in jail for the rest of her life. Now, she gets released in May. Cartwright lying to the FBI about the Iran deal, leaking to the New York Times and Newsweek. But I think, again, as I said at the top, Robert, and get your thoughts here, I think the more that we can have whistleblowers that don't face retribution, that open the dialogue, to me, that is a good thing. I don't want to see anybody, stopped for trying to bring truth to power. Your thoughts, my friend?
I agree. I mean, this is fundamental to our democracy. And we've got to remember that the Founding Fathers were very, very opposed to a standing army. I mean, that was a huge third rail issue originally, and it was assumed that if you had a standing army, you couldn't have a democracy. And so since World War II, we have certainly gone to having a very large military, starting because we never demobilized fully after World War II and then entered the Cold War. And that created a large national security apparatus, national security states. There were a large number of abuses of civil rights started in the McCarthy era and beyond and during the Vietnam era and moving forward throughout. And so we've got to remember that getting information to the public, even if it's something there are laws against, even if someone could be prosecuted, is the whistleblower is fulfilling an important democratic function. And if we didn't have the risk of whistleblowers even, there'd be even more transgressions. When you have large power that is unaccountable, then that's where abuses take place, and that's where you would lose any sense of democracy.
Well, I just think that, whether it's WikiLeaks or whether it is the work that has been done individually by Mr. Manning or Chelsea Manning, or whether we're talking about other leaks going back to Daniel Ellsberg, to me, this is what we need. We need to have less secrecy in the United States government, and more of an open idea, more open borders, if you want to talk about it. And I just think that that's a good thing. All right. I want to get your thoughts here on this article, that really is disturbing to me. I think it comes down here to this issue of Keith Ellison. If these folks in the third way, are able to attempt to destroy Keith Ellison, as they apparently, according to Jim Dean at Democracy for America, tried to destroy his brother and put all these candidates in there beforehand. This will be a sign that the Democratic Party and the establishment wing will prevail. And in my view, Robert, that will be the end of the future of the Democratic Party as a majority party in this country, because they cannot fly on one wing that is both getting older and eventually just getting more frustrated by the day. The young people will leave. They'll either turn independent. We just talked to our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield about those folks in the Pacific Northwest and Seattle and Portland who are big Bernie supporters. This whole group's intention, according to Miss Carney, who wrote the article in Politico, is to stop the lurch, as they call it, to the left by Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. Your thoughts, my friend?
It's really interesting that if you think about the two parties in the 21st century, and they have the same names they've had since the Civil War, but they've become very different parties, that the ruthless part of the Republican Party is the right-wing part of it. And they've picked apart moderates and chased them out of the party, right, in a very vicious manner. In the Democratic Party, the ruthless, heavily funded part is the center part. And, this goes back to the 1970s and the post-Watergate reforms and what happened with the party in the 80s. But William Greider, in his book, Who Will Tell the People, really depicted in very gruesome detail what had become the Democratic establishment. It was a constellation of consultants and lawyers and lobbyists in Washington that were running the party, and certainly very unrepresentative of average people. And we've seen the fruits of that, and we've seen, and it has been very damaging to working people and to economic opportunity. Is what Thomas Frank's new book is about, quite frankly, not the Greider part just talked about, but about how the party doesn't really represent average people, which is why it can't win the white working class, just for example, of losing votes to a charlatan like Donald Trump. And so, the problem is they have the money because they're the ones who think that you can represent average people and take all the dark corporate money. Bernie has argued that you can't, and that what the Clintons tried to do in the 90s, that was their solution to the problem, is take the money and then represent average people, but that led to NAFTA, eliminating Glass-Steagall, the crime bill, the welfare reform bill. That's what it all led to. So it actually meant selling out average people and the historical mission of the party in the 20th century. And so, but they have money, and so they can undertake these sort of operations. And I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that when people have power, they try to ruthlessly hold on to that power. The problem is that even if they're successful in some way, let's say that they greatly damage Bernie Sanders, Keith Ellison, and Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown, et cetera, and other people, they haven't changed the facts on the ground that their message that there will be a little bit better than the Republicans. We won't really solve the systemic problems, but we'll have at least do a little bit, right? Is not compelling to young people. It's not compelling to people who are either not voting, people of color who chose to vote, not to vote this year, who voted in the Obama elections. And it's not compelling to people, white working class folks who left the party and voted for a reality TV star. And so you are setting up a situation where you really could have a third party and where the current Democratic Party becomes the Whig Party. So even if they win, they lose, in my opinion, but they don't see it that way. They're just trying to hold on to their privilege. It's a kind of privilege.
Exactly, and I see this manifested in this direction here, to making Trump, be the devil. Look, there's no doubt that he would be a horrible president if he was to allow, some of the things that, particularly some of his cabinet choices, would be able to do, destroy public education with DeVos, destroy the Affordable Care Act, and any attempt, potentially to destroy Medicare and Medicaid that Mr. Price, who has a conflict of interest issue, wants to do to HHS. And you can go down the environmental disaster that Mr. Pruitt would be, on and on and on. That, to me, is the real issue. Not about Donald Trump and his tweets and all the other nonsense. And this is the true proof here. And, I was at a rally on Sunday with Elizabeth Warren and a lot of the Democratic progressive leaders in the Senate and the Congress, and a few other and about 2,000 other people. And, that's to me where the Democrats should be focusing their issues. And, look, John Lewis is an American hero, but let's move away from this stuff about illegitimate presidencies and so forth. As I said, in my view, the Republicans who control the Secretaries of State's office, who control the Attorney General's and the Governor's office, if their race was going to be close, as it ended up being, because Secretary Clinton didn't run away with the election, which she could have if she talked about issues like single-payer health care. She talked about the public option, which she was for, talk about the idea of education for up to $125K, talk about the idea of trade, particularly in the upper Midwest, where it's been damaged completely. It's close. Republicans will steal it. And they steal it not by switching a computer. They'll steal it because they'll take people off the voting initiatives. So if you're black and you name Jones or Smith, you get cross-checked off, as Mr. Pallas said. Or if you're a woman, her name Hernandez, and one person's named Christine, and the other one has, Chris, but both people get eliminated in all these secretaries of state, once again controlled by the Republicans, who control, 32 governorships and state houses? So this is, to me, what happened. And I think we just need to move forward. Enough of this other BS that's going on. And, again, I'm all for the protests that are going on. That's great. But let's be real about what is at stake. And these hearings that are going on, to me, is what at stake. What do you think about this, Robbie? Then we'll take some calls.
Well, there's a lot at stake, and you just covered a lot of ground. Basically, if they literally have the referees, right, and they're in a position to rig the voting system in states, then we just have to win elections by such a margin that they still can't win, right? That's the only solution, because if they're able to control the Secretary of State's office or the election commissions, and they're able to control 31 legislatures and governor's office and do photo ID, close down early voting, purge voting rolls, etc. And you have right-wing judiciary that will uphold all of this, whether it violates the intent of the Constitution and the amendments or not. And you just have to win elections. And if you're going to do that, then the big thing, I think, Jeff, is we've got to clean our own house. We've got to make the Democratic Party the party of reform.
Exactly.
Pure and simple. And so we have to win this internal fight, and now we have this rearguard action where the Hillary supporters still have the money, that is the establishment in D.C., to try to fight back and try to prevent progressives from taking over this party and shifting it to where the people are, where millennials are, where African Americans, Latinos, and Asians are, and where a lot of white working class people are if we would provide them this alternative. And a lot of them would have, no one believed the polls in the establishment Democratic Party that Bernie was running 11 points ahead against Trump compared to Hillary. Well, I think we found out that was true, and that Bernie was the only electable candidate at the end of the Democratic primary.
In the end, the independents wanted either a Bernie or a Trump. And when you didn't give them a choice with Sanders at the end, they ended up going for Trump. 772-925-8206. Let's go to Minneapolis and bring in our good friend John again. John, thank you for holding and welcome back. You have a question for Mr. Kraig?
Well, it was discussed previously with Mark Taylor-Canfield that, and then you brought it up too about establishing a new party, and I kind of shy away from that from the standpoint that that's a tremendous undertaking to do, and why can't we just take over the Democratic Party? I mean, is it that? Are they that entrenched that if we all showed up at our local, party meetings and just said, no, we're not going to do this, and no, we're not going to do that, and no, you're not going to tell us that this is what we're going to do, this, then perhaps we can, take over the party and use their, network. They have a huge network and they have lots of resources. They have connections with, other organizations and unions and et cetera. So, I don't know. I've been just briefly involved with the Green Party. I voted for Ralph Nader because I knew that, we were going to go Democrat here and Democratic in Minnesota, and I do like Ralph Nader. If we moved in a direction of Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden, we wouldn't have people begging out in the streets.
Sure.
People would be taken care of. The economy would probably do far better. So there's a healthy go-between between this. We're moving to extreme state-run plutocracy, capitalism, maybe even toward fascism, and then you have that other side perhaps that wants to just go in a totally different direction, which I thought the socialist alternatives represented, and it's it's confusing, and it's also exasperating, and I don't. It seems like what they want to do in the Democratic Party, and they've done it in this state, they want to use the real liberal people, the populists like Paul Wellstone. They want to have a Paul Wellstone, atmosphere, but they want to control it, behind the scenes. It's kind of maniacal. In a sense. Yeah,
on one hand, it's Paul Wellstone. On the other hand, let's act like Hubert Humphrey and Walter Mondale, right?
Yeah, and Walter Mondale. I mean, basically, what he was such a sellout to progressivism and liberalism. I heard him say, "Well, when we had 8, 9, 10, 15% growth in the economy, we could afford to have the Great Society programs." So what are you talking about? The money is all stashed in some other, offshore. They have taken that money and and this is how stupid it is. They're just, it's just enriching the banking system, and they're enriching themselves at the expense of creating even more wealth. They don't get it. There are Pulitzer Prize economists that critique this. I mean, if we had a real, media, then, this would be over. It didn't work. It enriched a few people at the expense of everybody else, and this just doesn't work.
Hold you right there. I want to get Robert in on this. Robert, you hear what John is saying. There's a frustration of another party, and I'm with him in that. You probably are too. But one of the things that he's pointing to is that there is this idea of using, whether it's Sanders or Warren, as one of our callers has said, as somewhat of a mascot. And that to me is concerning. Your thoughts about, what John is concerned about, and the idea of, and I think that it's a necessity that Ellison, is the guy. But I think that we need to be on guard here about how establishment Democrats say one thing and then basically mean another. Robert?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what John is saying about third parties as we've experienced them in this country in recent years is on the mark. I mean, these have not been parties that had a viable theory of power whatsoever, and therefore would seem especially depressing to anyone who actually wants to change society. They do seem like some sort of like the Elks Club or something, right? Not as something that's contending for power. But if the third way Democrats, they like to call themselves, there's a third way between right and wrong apparently, or have their way and can hold on to the party apparatus and prevent the Democratic Party from becoming a progressive party and a true party of reform, which is what it needs to do to succeed, and also to actually ultimately adopt policies that actually solve our major problems and open opportunity, deal with the climate crisis. It goes on and on. If they're going to deny us control of this party, then you do have to start thinking about the antebellum period, and there was a major party in the antebellum period that died over slavery. That was the Whig Party, and it was replaced by the Republican Party. So you would be looking, though, at a very different third party, and I don't think that's the preferable option. The Progressive Party, called the Bull Moose Party in 1912, was the closest thing, and it only lasted one election, and it really didn't get beyond the celebrity of former President Theodore Roosevelt. So I'm not saying it's the best option, but it is the only option left if we can't make the Democratic Party an appropriate vehicle for what needs to get done in this country.
That's very true. We come back, we'll continue the conversation with Robert Kraig and Mark. We'll also bring in our good friend Rudy from Chicago. And just this, folks, in my opinion, the only way you can do a new party is if someone like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, take a vast majority of Democrats with them on the progressive side. Don't forget there are 80 members that Ellison organized as Progressive Caucus. Not sure all of them would go, but that's how you would do it, not starting something brand new. We're right back.
Oh, I'm ready. Ready as anybody can be.
Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, to quote your friend Howard Dean, would be getting the middle finger if it is not Keith Ellison. And Keith Ellison has taken away the one thing they had on him, that he had said he'd resign from Congress to do it full time, which is a shame. But does resolve that particular little question they put out there. So, and my goodness, I mean, we have a Muslim, an African American, and a strong progressive who's extremely articulate, much more articulate than say Debbie Wasserman Schultz ever was or is going to be, or
Mr. Perez or anybody else. Exactly
right. So, obviously, when you ask what's not to like, it's because they think that he will not do the bidding of the donor class that really runs the party. What else could it be?
Exactly. Now, with that, John, if they decided to go against Ellison, and that basically, and if you agree with what Robert and I are saying, a middle finger to Keith Ellison and to Bernie Sanders. That may be the impetus to leave the Democratic Party, and I'm wondering if you would go with them if that was indeed the case.
Well, I think I would go with something that is really viable, and I would think that, if the progressives in the Democratic Party just all left and started a progressive party, they could just call it that. I think that's a good name for it. I think, it would not be a party run by ideology like socialist alternatives And even to a certain degree, the Green Party is kind of ideological. I think that progressivism would embrace a lot of different people and a lot of different ideas, and yeah, I would. I mean, yes, I do think that it would be a good thing. It's just that, I mean, and maybe Robert knows more about this than I do. I'm not a person that has a lot of knowledge about government, but we don't have a parliamentary system, nor do we have proportional representation, and so this party would really have to turn the whole, really grab millions of people. I think it probably could, because after all, Bernie Sanders brought in crowds like you would not believe all around this country, and there was a lot of enthusiasm, and I think that he would have even carried some of these red counties in Minnesota, and probably even some red states that, where they instead went for Donald Trump. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I appreciate the call, first of all, John. Thank you. Robert, your thoughts here, but I can tell you that to me, this is going to be the issue that determines the future of the Democratic Party. I believe that the Ellison vote will be, whether or not there is a Whig moment here for the Democratic Party. And I think that's where we're going right now. Robert?
So, I mean, John's a great caller. That was very insightful. Because he was working through the implications and how it would work.
Yep.
Back in 1912, which is the probably the best example, what happened was there'd been this cresting progressive movement that was stronger than the Republican Party and the Democratic, had elected a whole number of U.S. senators and governors, Fighting Bob La Follette in Wisconsin being one of the ringleaders. And after he got back, and so that was going on, there was an insurgency fighting with the Republican Old Guard in the Senate, in the U.S. Congress, over a lot of big level issues. And then what happened was that Theodore Roosevelt came back, had a falling out with William Howard Taft, thought he wasn't carrying on his legacy, the president, his hand-picked successor as president. And then he ran an insurgent campaign well to the left of Taft and the Stand Pat Republican Party. They called them Stand Patters at the time. And they denied him the nomination, even though he was immensely popular, by using all of the chicanery of party-run primaries. I mean, not even, weren't even primaries, just smoke-filled rooms selecting delegates. And so what happened was that they bolted from the Chicago Convention after he lost, across the street and created a new party. And a huge percentage of the Republican Party, a lot of the young progressive activists and leaders and senators and congressmen went with him. And they came in second to Woodrow Wilson. Their biggest problem was the Democrats nominated progressives. If they had not, he might have won the presidency. And the Republicans simply came in a distant third, but held on to the party, hoping that they would have a place for conservatism to flourish. And so when the party finally fell apart, a lot of office holders simply had to go back to the Republican Party or become Democrats. That was their choice, basically. I think in this context, and you probably need to do it much earlier because campaigns take much longer, take a lot more money. You couldn't put together such an operation that quickly anymore. That it's hard to imagine the Democratic Party, if you took all the progressive elements out, surviving very long. It would not. Where would it win elections? And
exactly.
Why would any of the donor class invest in it? Because they invest in it for power, not because of ideology or anything they believe in. They invest in it because they want to get policy out of it. So it seems to me that if you had a viable progressive party, I think John's right, that should be the name of it as it was in 1912, that it eventually the Democratic Party withers away pretty quickly, and everyone who stayed in it has to come to the Progressive Party because there's no place for any moderate or progressive in the modern Republican Party. So I would think it would be the death knell to the establishment Democrats if it happened, even though it'd be very messy.
Well, you're truly right. John is one of our great callers and great listeners. We have the best listeners in America, in my opinion, in talk radio. All right, let's go to another great caller, our good friend Rudy in Chicago. Rudy, you're next with our good friend Robert Kraig. How you doing, Rude?
Okay, Jeff. I support Aaron Rodgers' Robert Kraig. How about you?
He's a good Bernie guy, I know that.
Yeah, he's magic. Aaron Rodgers is magic. The last second he can win. That's what we need.
Yeah, good progressive.
No, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the only way to be successful is to go the Bernie way, Elizabeth Warren way, the progressive way, and I don't refer to the Democrats as the left, nor the other guys to the right. That's just when people call the Republicans to the right. They should be calling them something else. I'm not going to say what that is right now. But, I was listening to some interesting things today on the TV, the program The View, with some ladies that had some very interesting discussions on the new president and what's been going on in the election. And they had a entertainer on there. Her name is Jennifer Holliday. Maybe you heard of her.
Yep.
Yeah.
Winner of America's Got Talent or whatever.
Yeah, she's a singer, yeah. And they've been talking about how many performers have refused to go to this inauguration. Now, Jennifer Holliday was going to go. She was invited to go. She got so many emails and phone calls and death threats. And she said it was so overwhelming, she emailed them back and said she couldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, but I want to make this clear, and I understand where you're coming from, Rudy. But I really don't care. I really don't care, because what is this going to mean for stopping the DeVos, the cabinet secretary? What is this going to mean for our this Price and HHS? Absolutely nothing. I mean, I don't care if anybody came out and saying, "Look, 3, 4, 5, 6 doors down is going to play." Who cares? The other guy, the country singer Toby Keith. Who cares? I'm not going to watch it anyway. So I'll watch the speech and then I'll turn it off. What needs to be done here is we need to start focusing on these people who are going to take over the cabinet secretaries, and they're going to push legislation that the Republican Party, Paul Ryan, who Robert Kraig unfortunately lives in the same state with him and knows too well of his policies, and Mitch McConnell, they're the ones that are the problems here. And I just hope that people get that through their head. Enough of Trump being the evil man, because there's a lot more people that we get to contend with. That's all.
Pence is worse than Trump. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
And the reason why impeachment might work is because the Republicans would vote for impeachment, because they can't get along with Trump either, because he's so unpredictable. And I don't mean to say that it's the answer that he's so unfavorable with 40%, but I mean it's a start to kind of show the people how bad the Republican Party can be, that they have a guy like this. And for that matter, on the Sunday show, somebody said, "How come the Democrats picked a candidate that had so much baggage and was being under investigation?" So that's another thing we like to know about.
No, you're exactly right.
We got something right now, trying to get a real DNC person in there. And then we got Wall Street coming through, I think, with the $20 million to infiltrate the movement, to get the guy they want, and not the Keith Ellison. And so that's what we got. That's the big fight we got here. And all these people that are going against Trump now and saying all these nasty things, how come he got elected? Where's the people that voted for him? I don't see him anyplace. Where's the people that voted for him?
Yeah,
They're not pushing back on what the people are saying about Trump. So
No, I agree.
kind of funny.
How do you look at this, Robert, on what Rudy is saying here? Because I tend to think that, again, we need to focus is on these cabinet picks, and I want to get into the HHS one with you. But I look, I have no problem with the protests. I don't really care about Jennifer Holliday and Toby Keith and all the other nonsense that goes on with those folks. But to me, it's about those issues that are going to come before us on health care, on education, on the environment. Robert?
Well, you can't. One of the things about left politics is it can't really be command and control. So you have to go where the passion and energy is sometimes and figure out how to develop a viable strategy out of that. And so it's not like the Republicans who can just decide where their protests are going to be and on what because they fund them all, right? And can just pull the strings. So with that, there's going to be spontaneous outpourings and protests on things that occur in ways that we don't necessarily think are strategic if we're taking a step back, or if we were in a room, drawing out the perfect strategy to defeat Trump and defeat Pence and defeat Paul Ryan, etc. So having said that, so I agree with your analysis. It just has to, in terms of what the targets are, it's just a matter of how do we take this energy and make it as effective as possible on those targets, and how do we not dissipate it? Because our experience with the workers' rights protests in Madison, where you got up to 100,000 people out in the streets, which is unbelievable, right?
Right.
Is that ultimately there was no way to have recourse. There was an attempt by labor leaders to go into elections and recall elections because that was more comfortable ground, and they didn't have the organization within worksites to have a general strike. But then when you lost those recall elections in these tough gerrymandered districts, and when the Walker machine, it was shredding every campaign finance law on the books, got reelected, it dissipated all of the energy because there was no way for the movement to go. So we've got to figure out how this movement against Trump is both constructive and effective, and how it builds momentum, even if it loses vote after vote after vote early on in this administration. And that's a huge challenge that the left has not been very good at in recent years. Conservatives, very well funded, were very good at having tax revolts that failed for years but seemed to build momentum. And we need to think about how to do that. Again, I guess on the cultural grounds, like the entertainers who are boycotting, there's a cultural element to this, and they do have large followings, so I don't know. I mean, it could backfire to the extent it's seen as the entertainment and Hollywood elite doing it, and they're not real people and all of that. But also, these folks have a lot of sway, a lot more sway than a lot of elected officials, and so maybe that becomes part of some sort of cultural backlash against Trump that is effective ultimately. I don't know, but we're not in good shape if that sweeps Trump away and we have President Pence or President Ryan. And it has occurred to me, Jeff, that with these inklings, and it's like Trump's at war with the national security state, which is a dangerous adversary, obviously. That with these inklings that the Trump campaign may have been in communication with directly with Russia. Well, I mean, that's high crime and misdemeanors if it could ever be proven. And you could end up with President Pence or even President Ryan if Pence is involved. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm saying we have to keep that back of our mind that it's not impossible either.
Well, I mean, if you remember, it was a 1972 Nixon-Agnew ticket. And Rudy, you remember this. By 1974, it was a Ford Rockefeller party. So, they had to choose somebody after Agnew with the tax issues and had to resign. And of course, we all know what happened a year later with Nixon. And, so it is possible. But to me, Ryan is a lot worse than Trump. Now, look, if the whole ACA, it's the whole thing. So, yeah, I mean, that's the issue. Robert, we got a lot of work to do, my friend. Thank you for fighting. And we will be talking to you next Tuesday. All the best, man.
Thank you, Jeff. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. I want to thank our good friend Ron Kreider and our great new producer associate, Bob. And, of course, Sarah Billingsley on the web. Gio and Freddie Santori on video, and, of course, Jack Casey, D. Simpson right here at Emerson College. Keep on fighting, folks. Back tomorrow. My name is Jeff Santos, and I gotta go.